Imagine yourself in a situation where you're hanging out with your friend around an abandoned neighborhood, and you suddenly hear a loud explosion. And the next thing you see is a car on fire with a person on the front seat. This is exactly what a YouTuber, who goes by the name of Dan Bell, went through. And not just that, he could even capture it all on camera. Dan Bell is a filmmaker and YouTuber who spends his time documenting abandoned, forgotten locations, capturing the unsettling atmosphere of spaces left behind. On August 5th, 2018, he and his partner Jake set out for what was supposed to be a routine drive through an abandoned neighborhood. The area used to be a standard part of the city, but the homes had been cleared out long ago, leaving behind overgrown lots and dense trees. Only a handful of structures remained, severely weathered and crumbling from years of neglect. As they navigated and passed the empty roads, hollowed houses, and vacant plots, it felt like they were driving through a ghost town. The street was dead quiet initially, but after a while, they spotted a few cars parked awkwardly along the lots, which were completely out of place for an area that was supposed to be deserted. And before they could even process the strange sight, something shocking suddenly caught their attention.
Something just exploded.
Yeah. Dude, it was good. Dan, get the fuck out of here.
It's on fire!
No way. Dan. Dude, get the fuck out of here. Get the fuck out of here. Go, go, go. Dan, get out of here. Go, Dan, get out.
Someone call the police.
Dan, get the fuck
Get on the phone.
Go, go.
Get on the phone.
Get out of here, Dan.
Get the fuck out of here, please.
Dan,
Come on,
go.
just chill, guys.
No.
That's... Holy
Dude, please get out of here.
shit. Oh my god.
Go.
There's someone in the driver's seat.
What?
Yeah, call the police.
Holy shit.
Oh my god.
Hi, we just passed by a car that just caught on fire. We think it was an explosion.
Flames as tall as 8 to 10 feet tore from within the bushes out of the blue, accompanied by loud noises that sounded like sharp pops and bursts. The fire looked incredibly hostile in the heavy silence of the abandoned neighborhood, casting a horrifying glow over the surrounding trees and pavement. With their adrenaline surging, Dan and his crew immediately put the car in drive, pulling away from the growing fire. And as they passed by it, Dan noticed that it seemed like someone was sitting at the front seat of the burning car.
Go.
There's someone in the driver's seat.
What?
Yeah, call the police.
Holy shit.
Which disturbed the group even more, as they decided to contact emergency services right away. When police arrived onto the scene, Dan and his group tried to approach them, who were asked not to by the police personnel from afar.
Please do not come down here.
We're the ones that called. God damn it.
Oh, you got video.
I don't have video of the car. I don't have video of the whoever was doing this shit in the Mercedes.
By the time the fire department pulled up, the vehicle, which was a Cadillac, was nothing more than a ruined, smoldering frame of metal, sending thick layers of smoke into the air.
This is one of the most unbelievable situations I've ever had.
And after the situation was finally under control, Dan, along with his mates, decided to get a closer look at the site of incident. Take a look.
So now the firefighters are searching through this area here because when we drove by, the driver's side door was open and whoever was getting ready to set this car on fire, they had taken off.
Fortunately, it turned out that what looked like a person in the front seat of the burning car was nothing more than pillows stacked on top of each other. And it also turned out that there were no casualties during the entire incident, which was a relief to everyone. However, information about who would do such a thing and why is still unknown, and there have been no updates on the matter even to this day. It's an unsettling thought as to who would do such a bizarre thing in the middle of an abandoned neighborhood. And even if it was just a prank, setting an entire car on fire is a pretty expensive joke. One possibility people were discussing in the comments was that the car might be related to a crime, and maybe the culprit was trying to get rid of the evidence. But in the end, all of it was just speculation, and no one really knows why the Cadillac was set on fire that day, along with a stack of pillows in the front seat. The YouTube channel Graffiti, run by Sergei Pavlenko, usually focuses on typical urban exploration, documenting quiet trips into abandoned places around Russia. On April 21, 2021, Sergei, accompanied by his friend, decided to explore an old industrial training ground where abandoned aircraft were rumored to be stored. Earlier that day, the weather had been strangely active, as severe rain and heavy winds had completely soaked the landscape, making it seem like their exploration would have to be cancelled entirely. But by evening, the storm finally began to clear, and the team decided to head out anyway. They weren't entirely sure if the rumors were accurate, but the mystery of the place was enough to draw them in. As they navigated the damp fields, they passed rusted machinery, broken rails, and scattered debris, which were clear signs of the land's heavy industrial past. In the distance, they spotted a small derelict structure sitting near several strange depressions in the earth, deep holes that resembled old maintenance pits or open wells.
Здесь тоже труба.
Глубоко, ребята, очень глубоко.
Не, тут метров, наверное, такие 5 как минимум.
Это, видимо, какие-то либо отстойники, хрен его знает. Но явно не бункер, это, короче, что-то с водой связано.
Смотри, видишь, бутылок. Ну, это, наверное, вход оттуда
А, ну,
сюда.
это они. Угу. Вот, ребята, смотрите, сколько бутылок. Здесь есть кто-нибудь?
Initially, the landscape felt entirely still and safe to explore, but a closer look by the explorers revealed just how treacherous the terrain actually was. Dozens of hidden drop-offs were scattered across the field, some of which were filled with murky water, while others partially masked by overgrown grass. Many of these pits were virtually invisible until you were standing directly on the edge. A single misplaced step around that area could easily send someone plummeting several meters into the earth. Despite the obvious threats of the place, the team kept moving forward. Nearing the main abandoned building, they discovered a narrow opening leading down into what appeared to be an underground chamber, the entrance to which was choked with debris, old bottles, and trash, which were clear indicators that other people had frequently visited the site. But as they peered into the pitch-black void, something specific caught their attention.
Подожди, куда?
Вон какие-то наушники. Да. О, тут есть кто-нибудь? Отзовитесь. Потому что мы будем сейчас спускаться. Слышите? О.
А, там что-то лежит. Как шнурок, видишь вот это?
Ну это наушники.
Наушники.
Да.
Не, вот, а вон дальше, видишь?
At first glance, it just looked like an obscure silhouette resting on the floor below, which they thought might be a discarded bag or a pile of old clothing someone had thrown down there. But the outline of the shape didn't look quite right, so they decided to dig deeper into the matter. The explorers even tried calling out into the darkness of the chamber, waiting to see if anyone would respond, but the underground space remained dead silent. Wanting to get a clearer view of what they were looking at, they attached a flashlight to a camera and slowly lowered it into the opening, aiming the beam directly at the strange-looking object.
Камеру с фонарем. Надеюсь, фонарь не отпадет.
Это придется точно залазить.
Да. Отзовитесь!
As the light cut through the darkness, the unsettling details of the object began to surface. They could point out socks, pants, and a form that looked like a human body. For a brief moment, they tried to convince themselves it was just a mannequin or some elaborate prank, like the kind of strange anomalies frequently left behind in abandoned spaces to scare off strangers. But the longer they looked at that thing, the more convinced they were that it was nothing less than a real human body. By this time, the explorers had realized that something was definitely wrong here and made a decision of immediately backing away from the opening and contacted the authorities, who didn't take long to arrive. When they reached the explorers, officers carefully assessed the entrance before calling in specialized rescue teams equipped to descend into the shaft safely. When the rescuers finally made their way down into the subterranean room, the unfortunate and disturbing reality was officially confirmed.
А як? А далі? Що? Далі витягуй. Просто? О, а що? Ну що, нав'язуйте на палку. Нав'язуйте, пускай, палку пускай. Ниже, пальці. Палку пускай, ниже, попід ноги.
Ніже, во. Подимай. І що? Туди давай, щоб голову йому не розбити. Братан, давай.
Regrettably, it turned out that the object was the very thing the explorers prayed for it to not be, which was a human body. What happened to the deceased person is still unknown to this day to even the explorers, because the authorities didn't provide them with any updates into the matter. Sergei and his mate later admitted that the decision of not lowering themselves down in that instance probably saved them from the possibility of even getting stuck underground with a corpse, which is a haunting scenario to even imagine. The Channel Sanborn Construction Group, run by Nick Sanborn, typically handles standard property walkthroughs in which they evaluate structural damage, estimating restoration costs, and helping real estate investors determine if a property is worth the investment. On September 13th, 2025, in what was supposed to be just another routine assessment inside an abandoned Detroit home, led to a pretty unsettling discovery for Nick and his team. The crew had been sent to the property by an out-of-state client who found the listing online and needed a professional evaluation before making an offer to the owner. From the outside, the structure looked to be in terrible condition, with virtually every window smashed out and chunks of the exterior siding entirely stripping away. It was immediately obvious that the house had been sitting in abandonment for years. While an abandoned house isn't an uncommon sight in certain parts of Detroit, the true nature of the property didn't become clear until they stepped through the front door. Massive portions of the interior had been completely gutted. The floorboards where a central wall used to stand were visibly rotten and spongy, creating a dangerous structural gap. As Nick and his crew walked through a scattered pile of old clothing and trash left on the floor, one of the crew members suddenly paused and took a closer look into the accumulation, where he found something disturbing.
Like a metal wire mat.
Hey, Connor.
What?
It's a real gun.
Is it really? It's not a cap gun or anything?
Oh, you feel it.
Oh yeah, that's real.
Just be careful. Don't shoot yourself.
There's got to be a way to open it, but I don't see like any form of a release.
At first glance, the object resembled a replica or a toy, but the moment they lifted it and held it in their hands, the sheer weight confirmed that it was nothing less than a real firearm. And just then, they uncovered a second weapon hidden nearby only moments later.
My gun is way newer than that.
There's
so
another
I don't
one
know how
over here.
this works.
There's another one. Probably just...
I think so too. You probably don't want to be touching them all over though.
Yep.
We just hand printed the f out of
So I'm
them.
gonna call the cops.
Charlie 911, what is the address of emergency?
We're a contractor working in an area. We just entered a dwelling for the first time. We found 2 handguns in the house.
The discovery of these firearms in the middle of a peaceful property assessment immediately shifted the entire dynamic of what was supposed to be a standard construction walkthrough for Nick and his crew, who were all in shock by this point. The weapons, however, weren't the only anomalies hidden inside the house. As the team continued to survey the remaining rooms, they began to spot a pattern of highly unusual items left behind.
You never know. They could be part of a previous crime. They could be just somebody stashing them to come back later and get them, because when you look through here, There's burner phones that Frank's found.
It's the third one.
Stuff like that you can tell they've cracked open to sell them. Any contractor stuff that you can find, brand new out of the box, ripped open, is usually a sign of theft. You got car parts or something there too, which could indicate that at one point this was a chop shop.
Where's the basement?
Right here.
So I'd be curious to see what the heck this story holds.
Discarded among the trash were several burner phones. These are inexpensive, untraceable devices frequently used for temporary off-grid communication. While some were missing their batteries, others appeared to be in near-perfect condition, which signified that someone was still using them. At this point, the further they investigated, the more unsettling the scene became. Despite the building's completely derelict state, there was undeniable proof that it was actively being used.
It's kind of bizarre. This is all hollow.
Yeah, the way it's cracking up.
That's hollow.
You can see right through here.
So it's obviously it was
Pitted.
dumping into the ground.
Yeah. New electrical.
But a new panel on it. Somebody was trying to do.
Down in the basement, a crew member named Connor discovered that the home's electrical wiring had been illegally bypassed and spliced directly into the main city power lines. Even more baffling was the fact that they found fully operational internet equipment tucked away inside the structure.
Wi-Fi on this house.
So there must be an alarm or
I've
something.
seen the camera out there, but
I would think it works then. I mean, it's... Look at that.
that's amazing. I gotta get a picture of this.
So this is how you hook up to power with no power outlet. You just wire straight to the, whatever that thing's called, plug.
Yeah. Edit out whatever that thing's called.
By now, it was clear that the house was fully supplied with live electricity and active Wi-Fi in a structure that legally should have had neither. Recognizing the immediate danger, the crew halted their inspection, notified the authorities, and waited for them to arrive. Responding officers secured the firearms as evidence, noting they would undergo ballistics testing to see if they matched any open criminal investigations. Waiting out on the street, the contractors were left to process the bizarre turn of events. After all, to them it started just as a standard property estimate, but by the end, it devolved into an active crime scene investigation, proving that sometimes the most dangerous secrets are hidden right at the places where you least expect them. On January 22, 2020, a video was uploaded to a YouTube channel called The Fam, detailing an exploration that turned life-threatening far quicker than anyone anticipated. The creator, James, had traveled to a vacant location heavily rumored to be potentially haunted. He timed his visit just before sunset, aiming to have enough natural light to navigate safely while still capturing a dark atmosphere. From the exterior, the structure already looked incredibly unstable, with portions of the building completely broken down, and several sections even looked ready to collapse under a person's weight, which were hazards of this exploration that became clear almost immediately to James. His exploration started off with a little accident, which also seemed to have set the tone already. A couple of moments into the exploration, he misplaced his footing and fell into a water-filled dip, soaking his shoe and injuring his knee.
That's because... Oh, God. And that's why I film on the ground, guys. Damn it. I think I twisted my right knee. Oh, God.
As James pushed deeper into the property, he began to hear faint and easily dismissed noises, but it gradually became clear and sounded like actual voices conversing somewhere on the floor above him.
This is one of my more scarier explorers, guys. And I definitely have... Guys, we're gonna keep on going. I hear people up there. I guess there's like a second floor or second story. Do you hear that? There's like a bunch of people up there. Where am I headed right here? This is so freaking sketchy. I don't know of a video I've ever been this freaked out, especially the fact that I'm alone and I have no protection.
In that instant, the entire dynamic of the exploration had changed. James immediately quieted his movements, dropping his voice to whispering, and tried to trace the origin of the sounds. Though he couldn't see anyone, the presence of someone else in the building was undeniable by this point, and instead of turning back, he made the decision to move forward. Navigating the fragile building with extreme caution, James tried to pinpoint the location of the voices while keeping himself hidden. Eventually, he caught a sudden flash of movement on the upper level, which further confirmed that he was definitely not alone.
Next time I need to look and then step, not step and then look. Whoa, is that a hole? I don't know if that's a building or a wall. Oh, maybe, wait. Is that somebody up there? Is that somebody up there? No, yeah, it is somebody up there. Whoa. Alright, I don't want them to see me.
From that point on, the structural dangers of the crumbling building were the least of his worries. The immediate threat at the moment was the terrifying possibility of turning a corner and running directly into someone with bad intentions. Unfortunately, it didn't take long for that exact scenario to play out, and then this happened.
Gotta watch my step back here for sure. Oh shit! What the? Yo, bro, come on. Yo, I'm good, dude. You alright? I'm just making a video, dude. Bro, you need anything? You okay? Alright, I got you, man. Alright, man. I'm just making a video, bro. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be in your place.
Without any warning, a man appeared and aggressively rushed toward James, who reacted instantly by backing away while trying to de-escalate the confrontation. He tried explaining that he was just a videographer and meant no harm, and instead of retreating back out through the main entrance, James made a split-second decision to sprint up the stairs, hoping to put physical distance between himself and the stranger, at least for the time being. However, that choice only made things worse.
Give me a freaking heart attack. I wish you could feel my heart right now. I knew that was gonna happen. I knew something like that was gonna happen here. Where the hell am I up here? I don't want to go back down that way. Oh, hell no. What the hell, guys? Whew. That scared the living crap out of me because I had no idea there was anybody there. Oh, I gotta breathe. Oh my God, my heart is beating so fast. Look at this crap. Oh my God. Oh, that about gave me a heart attack, fam. I might have to go back down that way.
Once he reached the top level, James quickly realized he was now trapped and had no idea where any alternate exits were. The layout of the building was completely disorienting, which wasn't helping the situation at all. The flooring was structurally unsound, and he was now backed into an unfamiliar corner with no clear escape route. Running out of options, he did something unexpected by pulling out his phone and initiating a live stream, in the hopes of getting things uploaded if they go wrong, so that online viewers could witness what was happening to him in real time. Eventually, James had to force himself back down the stairs as that was the only way out known to him, while being entirely unsure if the squatter was still waiting for him at the bottom.
I don't know if he's down there. Yo, if you're down here, I'm friendly. Hey! All right, bro. Come on, man. I told you, I'm just filming, bro. Hey, stay back there, dude. Yo, hey, don't worry about what you're saying, dude. Just keep yourself back there. All right, okay. All right, we out here. Yeah, all right, man.
Thankfully, James made it out of that place safely without coming across anyone. Reflecting on the encounter later, James openly admitted how reckless the situation had gotten. His plan for content had moved past a simple exploration and turned into a hostile encounter that could have ended disastrously. On June 16, 2011, the channel Sentient Anomaly uploaded footage showcasing what appeared to be an entirely deserted village somewhere around the outskirts of Toronto, Italy. The entire area was consumed by severe decay, with absolutely no signs of human activity since decades. The creator, after arriving at the location, immediately noted how unnerving the absolute solitude felt. As he began inspecting the homes one by one, every single structure shared the same haunting characteristics: hollow rooms buried under thick layers of dust and filth. Despite the repetitive, decaying scenery, he kept pushing deeper into the settlement, checking every corner and even climbing onto rooftops, desperate to find any clue that could explain why an entire community had suddenly vanished. When he couldn't really find anything of value to show the viewers around the abandoned place, he made a decision that the next house he enters will be the final one. And the moment he stepped into one of its back rooms, he saw something truly bizarre in sight. Take a look.
Ooh, smell. What the fuck is this?
Sitting directly in the center of the space was a human-sized object, which was wrapped tightly in a thick plastic-like fabric and positioned on top of a raised pedestal. That entire setup looked like it was calculated, signaling that this wasn't just random debris left behind during a hurried evacuation, unlike the rest of the place, like something intentionally placed there for something like a ritual. Even the environment inside the room itself felt suffocatingly heavy and unnaturally warm compared to the rest of the house and the village. There was also a pungent odor that cut through the space, making it nearly impossible to breathe for the explorer. Rather than moving closer to inspect the wrapped object, the explorer halted the exploration entirely right then and there and made an immediate decision to back out. By this point, his curiosity had completely given way to an intense sense of danger, so he chose to walk away before learning the terrifying truth of what was inside. As the video started to blow up, the YouTuber decided to share more of his opinion on the incident 3 years later. He mentioned that he never went back to find out what the thing really was, and is unsure of whether if it was a corpse or not. Either way, something like that wrapped in plastic in the middle of a room in an abandoned village is nothing short of unsettling. The channel Wooden City frequently documents quiet walkthroughs of historical wooden architecture across a city called Arkhangelsk in Russia. In a video uploaded on February 26, 2026, the explorer visited one of these properties located on Meshchersky Street, built in 1934 for workers at a sawmill. The house had already been officially condemned and vacated, and from the outside resembled many of the other aging timber structures in the region, as it was silent and heavily weathered from years of abandonment. And it could be observed through the explorer's perspective that doors had been violently pried open. Sections of the interior walls were smashed, and old cabinets sat half open against the walls, with their shelves completely bare. Moving further into the structure, he continued navigating the layout room by room, picking up on small, subtle details that hinted at the lives once lived there. For a while, the exploration remained entirely uneventful, but as he paced down one of the main hallways, a sudden flash of movement in a nearby room suddenly cut through the stillness.
Здорово. Все хорошо у вас?
Initially, it was difficult to make out what he was looking at amongst the mess. But stepping closer, he realized a man was lying inside the room. The individual appeared to be roughly 40 years old and was visibly in an extremely weakened state. He was shivering violently and bundled in multiple layers of clothing as a desperate attempt to fend off the sub-zero temperatures inside the cold building. A heavy odor of alcohol hung in the air around him, making it immediately clear that the man had been drinking heavily.
А что случилось-то? Чего? Чего говоришь?
Замерзаю. Купите водки, пожалуйста.
Мужик, водку?
Согреться. Согреться. Я согреюсь. Я вот там к отцу пойду.
Мужик, водка не помогает.
Пожалуйста. Пожалуйста. Купите, пожалуйста. Я вот там к отцу пойду.
When the explorer called out to him, the man immediately begged for alcohol, insisting it was the only thing that would warm his body up. The desperate plea was deeply unsettling given his weak physical state. Refusing the request, the explorer told the man he would bring him water instead, and strongly urged him to let him call for medical assistance.
Купишь, пожалуйста.
Я скоро тебя вызову, мужик.
Нет, и воды. Пить очень хочется.
Хорошо.
Спасибо, блядь, спасибо. По-человечески тебе спасибо.
Briefly exiting the property, the explorer hurried to a local shop to purchase fresh bread and water. Yet even after he returned with the food, the man could only focus on requesting vodka, repeatedly claiming the freezing cold was too much and that the alcohol was his only relief.
Братан. Водки нету. Держи, воду попей. На, покушай, хлебушка. Свежий, горячий еще даже. Все, братан, ну...
Пожалуйста, я сам зайду. Тасов, он продает.
Братан, все, вот кушай, пей, отходи как-нибудь и...
Deeply alarmed by the man's rapidly deteriorating condition, the explorer finally contacted emergency services to report an exposed, vulnerable individual inside the abandoned structure. With help on the way, he stepped back out into the harsh winter environment. The silent streets of Arkhangelsk now felt incredibly peaceful compared to the sad reality he had just uncovered inside. Urban exploration often leads to forgotten artifacts and empty, silent spaces. But in this instance, the most disturbing discovery wasn't the decaying architecture, but the sudden realization that a human being was freezing to death inside it, completely invisible to the rest of the world. And with that, we've come to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed watching, hitting that like button would mean the absolute world to me. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. I promise you, it'll be worth it. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, stay spooky.